8 minutes past 9 a.m. Yes, feeling rejuvenated, feeling inspired, feeling energized. That beautiful Nasheed, Medina, on this day of Jummah, as we continue with the show this morning. And if you have just tuned in, we welcome you to the show. And it's time now to go across to Dr. Shameem Jamdullay, Senior Research Scientist at the UCT Lung Institute. We see South Africa issuing new COVID guidelines and restrictions, and this includes mask mandates. And whichever way you look at it, there has been some criticism that has been leveled at the government. Others are saying it's completely necessary. And let's just try and unpack what these new guidelines and restrictions actually mean. Dr. Shameem Jamdullay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jummah Mubarak to you. We appreciate you taking time out. Welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Juma Mubarak to you and all your listeners. Shukran again for putting your trust in me to unpack all the story about COVID. I know people are very tired of that now. Alhamdulillah, we've been able to have an Eid that is very different to the last 2 years. And yes, just like the epidemic, the measures that goes with it and controlling it are also evolving. And inshallah, we'll unpack all of that and to the best of my knowledge during this time.
Yes. Now, just up front, what do you make of these new guidelines and restrictions that the National Health Act obviously has now been gazetted and announced by the Department of Health?
So if you look at that, there are many two restrictions that remain in place. The first one being the mask mandate indoors, and the second one being the limit on the gathering that can happen indoor and outdoor. So let's take the first one, the mask mandate. So right now, what has been stipulated is that it is the prerogative of the Minister of Health to decide when and where and how the mask mandate will be enforced, and he can rescind that at any time that he deem like suitable to do so. And I kind of agree with the requirement to continue wearing masks indoor. And the reason for that is very simple, and it follows common sense. Right now, here in our country, we're moving into the winter month, where we know that outside of the COVID epidemic time, we are, at exposure to many of the respiratory infection because these are seasonal. These happens around that time of the year. For example, your seasonal influenza. You have other viruses that generally also circulate around that time, like what we call respiratory syncytial virus. We have some adenovirus also that circulates. So to be able to control the epidemic of flu, not only COVID, but flu as well, because we cannot differentiate between COVID and flu just based on the symptoms. It's extremely difficult unless you do a rapid test or you do a PCR in the lab like people have been accustomed to right now. So looking at it from that perspective, it seems very reasonable that the mask mandate, at least right now, when we're going up in the number of cases during this fifth wave, and we need to also look at who are the main people and spreaders right now. These are the category, the age category of 9 to 18 and from 19 to 28. So these are people who are either in school, primary school and high school, or people who are young, mobile, working. And what we also need to understand is that it's extremely difficult to actually enforce these types of mandates, or any form of physical separation in school without actually exposing people. So the mask has and remain the best and the most efficient form of barrier against transmission or spread or acquisition of the virus. Not even the vaccine is as effective as the mask. And for me, it is completely logical that at least for now, while we're going up in the number of cases because of our fifth wave, and also because of the setting in of winter and all the other respiratory infections, that we keep the mask mandate. So that's with regard to the mask.
Yes, and then obviously the issue surrounding gatherings, and we know we've just come out of the month of Ramadan as well, and particularly looking at indoor gatherings. And once again, 50% of the venue capacity has come up, and also at the same time, you know, identifying between people who have been fully vaccinated versus those who have been unvaccinated?
So I agree, and I also have certain disagreement with the regulations surrounding the gathering. And the reason why I think it is not suitable anymore, especially in an outdoor setting, is we know scientifically now, and from 2 years of doing research, whether it's epidemiological in nature that is studying the trends and the patterns around spreads and disease, with regard to coronavirus, or looking at the science of how it spread, what are the risks that are involved with like an increased risk of acquisition. We know that outdoor gatherings are not going to be big contributors to the rise in the number of cases. And saying that, we have seen what has been happening in Europe, for example, or in the Northern American countries, where there have been in outdoor sport events. Like stadiums have been full, whether it's for football, whether it's for rugby, whether it's for, like any other sports that they have. And For me, there's no complete logic in actually having restriction with regard to outdoor gathering. Maybe the government is worried about other things that may lead to, like a cluster outbreak, maybe in certain areas. Um, but with regard to the indoor, there is some logic in keeping a limit, because you also want to be, like quite far spread and physically distanced from people when you are in an area that is not as well ventilated, as well aerated, and you will be having probably like more regular contacts with similar surfaces as other people who may be infected. So yes, that with regard to the numbers, it's okay. But with regard to the vaccine requirement right now, for anything, there is no more logic in enforcing any form of vaccine mandate for people to be able to do anything, because we clearly know that with the level of infection that we have reached in the country, we have reached the level of endemicity. People have been protected mostly by having already been infected rather than having been vaccinated, because we know that it's only 30% of people of our population who are eligible right now for vaccination that have been vaccinated. And we also look at the number of hospitalization cases that remain low compared to all of our previous wave, and the number of deaths that remains still low compared to our previous wave. But saying that it is rising, because obviously the number of cases is rising right now.
Yes, and also the question surrounding vaccination and unvaccinated travelers. Now we see South Africa is not enforcing that people must be vaccinated to enter the country. I mean, those that are vaccinated must produce a vaccination certificate, but those that are unvaccinated must provide a valid certificate of a negative COVID-19 test. So we are not enforcing that vaccination rule, unlike some countries,
Correct.
because possibly those traveling out of South Africa, there are countries that have enforced that you must be vaccinated. And so South Africa is not enforcing this. And just your thoughts that, because we know that when the vaccine and obviously, or when the pandemic had started, it had emerged out of Italy. These were people that came from other parts around the world into the country. And, how does one actually find a balance between vaccinated and unvaccinated travelers coming into the country?
Brother, it is not only South Africa, it's a lot of countries that actually enforce that. And obviously, this is mainly driven by economic reason. And this is one of the few things that have actually some form of loophole because of economic reasons and the need to actually make money, the need to be able to sustain, like keeping jobs. For example, in the hotel industry, while we have limit on the gatherings that we have for any form of leisure, religious, or any other, reasons, the hotels have been allowed to actually start functioning at 100% capacity, but obviously, conditional on them forcing people and enforcing mask wearing inside their premises where people can meet, for example, in the dining hall. And similarly for the travel, There is one reason that I have been reading with regards to why they want people to get vaccinated, and especially tourists. I'm talking about people who not resident or citizen of like a specific country. It's to make sure that if these people actually get infected when they are within the country where they're visiting, like for example South Africa, and if they do develop severe disease, they're not going to be adding to the burden of cases that we have in hospital. And but again, when you think of it, it's going to be a very small minority of people who will be at risk of contributing to that burden. So when it comes to that, I don't think there is any other reason other than the economic reason to allow the tourist industry to actually breathe a little after almost 2 years of like restricted borders. And we all know the economic impact that this has had.
Yes, and just finally, Dr. Shamim, there are those who are critical of these regulations, particularly looking at the National Health Act in South Africa. And some are saying that these are not just short term or transitional measures because there has been no end date that has been provided, because the government is considering long term changes under the National Health Act. And this pandemic would present an ideal opportunity or an ideal excuse for the government to implement some of these regulations, which possibly some are saying draconian, and there are also people that want to challenge the government, take this matter to court as well.
I understand the frustration of people. COVID has been really long. We've never ever in modern history have had to deal with so much restriction across the board in developed countries, in developing countries, in countries with much lower income, and it is very frustrating. And what I do understand also is that there is a fear from people, whether it's political, whether it's social, that like these are things that are put in place to limit people or to control people. But what people need to understand is that just like the epidemic has been evolving, our understanding as researchers, as scientists, as medical doctors who have been in the background always advising the government with regard to how to deal with this epidemic. This knowledge has also evolved and improved and increased, because the more time we spent learning about the virus and the epidemic, the more knowledge we gathered, and the more we realized, okay, we have things under control, we have certain things under control now. And this is why you've seen a collective of these very same researchers, scientists, medical doctors, who have publicly voiced out their issues with certain regulation and restrictions that came with that. And I do actually at least applaud that the government has extended the public comment regarding those measures in place. But what you need to understand as well is everybody can have an opinion. Everybody can have a belief that this is either to protect the population at large, or to restrict the population for some obscure reason. But for me, whenever there is any form of engagement in that sense, which is public, I am a professional in my field. I will give my opinion, which is a professional opinion and an educated opinion. But if the same thing were to happen, for example, regarding what's happening now in Russia and Ukraine, I do not deem that I am fit to give my opinion on that, because I do not understand and I do not master the subject. So while we are open to giving comments and adding to the discussion that is out there, I think the voices that we need to hear are voices of reason and voices of people who are masters of their trade, or who have some understanding, whether it's social, whether it's medical, whether it's economic, or any other aspect that is impacting on that right now. And yeah, so inshallah we will get over that very soon. I anticipate that leaving the winter, COVID is not going to be as big a problem, and a lot of these measures will fall away, inshallah.
Well, inshallah. And just finally, Doc, we know we're heading into the winter season, and whether we're talking about COVID-19 or the flu season, the key issue here is immune systems that have been compromised. And I'm just looking at a quick comment that has come through. from a one of the listeners, Leah Lynette Roberry, who says, "Salams, doctor. Would you recommend turmeric, ginger, cayenne pepper, cloves, cinnamon sticks, honey, and lemon? A good tea for building immune systems."
Absolutely. All the ingredient that has been listed in there now for this tea and for this concoction are all very healthy. Obviously you need to get your very balanced supply of fruits or vegetables, especially vitamin C, as we know, is very important to maintain our defense against the seasonal viruses and bacteria that affect our body right now. But one last thing, added to this traditional, like very back from the time remedy that we have. What I would also advise people to do, and this is speaking mostly to the older people and the women who are pregnant, they need to get their flu shot because we have not really been exposed that much to the seasonal flu for the past 2 years, mainly because of border closures. And when people will get infected with the flu virus this season, it can actually manifest with much more severe symptoms. And for the older people who are the people who normally get hospitalized mostly because of flu, these are, a very important population to make sure that we protect. So if they have the means to actually go and get a flu vaccine, they should do that, inshallah. And obviously, keep a very balanced diet and keep using all these things that have been keeping us healthy for so many years, inshallah.
Well, Dr. Shameem Jamdullay, shukran to you. Jazakallah so much for taking time out talking to us this morning. We do appreciate. Have yourself a wonderful Jummah ahead, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Dr. Shameem Jamdullay, senior research scientist, unpacking the new COVID guidelines and regulations. When we come back, we'll be joined by Hafiz Ibrahim Musa. A quick update on Masjid al Aqsa. We still will be talking about the DA leader, John Steenhuisen, who's come under fire, facing a backlash after his recent Ukraine visit, and also taking a look at kidnappings out in the Eastern Cape.